are you? Answer me. Say, I, Leviathan. I, Leviathan. Come on. I, Beelzebub. I, Beelzebub. We, the people of God, agree. Obey the man of God. Obey the will of God. Come out of her in the name of Jesus. Go. What if there was no deliverance, just you and your demons? Is that the kind of world you'd want to live in? There are many in American Christianity. They want you to live in that kind of world where there's no deliverance. So victims of satanic torment, what do? They blame themselves. They think they're doing something wrong, or they're told they're doing something wrong. And it keeps these people in a spiritual trap. There's no way out of that world without deliverance. And too many people live in it. I had a lady just come to me a couple of days ago. She said, I went to every priest in my city. I went to every evangelical pastor in my city. Nobody would even talk to me. I talked to her 5 minutes and demons are popping up all over the place. Just because I listened. Pastors, many times, don't listen. They preach at the people. They're laying down the rules. They tell them the way it ought to be. They don't hear the way it is in the real world for the common person. In our world of exploding internet porn, the dramatic explosive growth of the new age and so on.
What would you say are some of the most common ways you've seen people get demons?
We have too many theological leaders in our country who are just dinosaurs. They're part of a past that no longer exists. This is the age of occultism, mysticism, metaphysical belief systems being normative. 75 to 80% of evangelical Christians don't believe that Christ is the only way, that there are other ways to God. So this creeping sense of compromise, this is the new normal in America. Wake up, church, wake up, pastors. There's a new normal, and that new normal brings with it a truck full of demons.
Well, guys, welcome to this episode. I am excited that you're joining us today. I believe today the scales are going to be removed from your eyes, and you're going to see that there are things behind this physical world. There's a spiritual world. The Bible talks about it. Today, I have the pleasure and the honor of having Dr. Bob Larson with us. He's no stranger not only to my channel, but he's no stranger to many of you, as well as no stranger to the people who are exposed to the ministry of deliverance and spiritual warfare. He's a man of God, he's a father, he's a husband, but most importantly, he's a demon slayer. He casts out demons. He's been featured on so many different networks, and he is the foremost authority on the topic of occult, witchcraft, deliverance. And he's not just somebody who studied these topics, but he's somebody who does this. Like just before this, I asked him a question, your scariest deliverance, and his answer is like, oh, I think that's the one that happened yesterday. So he's in the trenches. He's ministering to not only demonized people, he's ministering to pastors and leaders, deliverance ministers who are struggling with demons. Every single day he's doing that. And so he doesn't stop. And so today I have the privilege of having him, and I believe that open your heart, God's going to speak to you today in a powerful way. So Dr. Bob Larson, I'm glad that you're here today.
Thanks for the kind words. I can't wait to hear what I have to say.
Come on, somebody. Could you take us to the beginning? How did everything begin for you? I remember reading your book, the very big book about Bob Larson's pretty much study on occults and false religions. And I don't know how long it took you to study that, but from what I've understood is that you were kind of going around different countries and learning about the occult, and before even you started to do deliverance. Can you take us to how you started with all of this?
Well, I just started as a farm kid in Nebraska. Went to the University of Nebraska. I planned to go into medicine. I became a Christian. Felt a call to ministry. Had no idea what that would look like. Found a few pastors who would let me share my testimony. And then I signed up with a lecture agency and did motivational speaking for about 3 years, which developed some speaking skills. But I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I took off to see the world. In those days, you could buy a round-trip world ticket. Go anywhere you wanted to. Just keep going. Don't go backwards. Just keep going forwards. And I just went to dozens of countries all over the world, but I got a real shock when I got to Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, India, and so on. I saw demonic rituals and ceremonies, and I didn't know what it was, didn't understand it, never heard anything about it, never saw anything like that, but I was intrigued by it, not in an unhealthy way, so I would seek out these ceremonies and rituals, self-mutilation ceremonies, spirit conjuration ceremonies, voodoo ceremonies. And in each of these cases, there was a common theme. And that was when you ask the people what's going on, because at some point they go into these seizures, they fall to the ground, they scream, they thrash about. They said, well, that is when our God enters into us. And to them, that's a very positive thing. That's what they want. They want to be possessed by the gods. That's a very holy thing to them. So I thought, well, this looks like what the Bible calls demon possession. So I came back to the United States, continued on with what I was doing, and didn't think I would be an exorcist or anything like that. Until one night, I was speaking at a youth rally. They'd asked me to come and share my testimony because I'd been a professional musician and I'd come out of that kind of an interesting story. And so I spoke, shared my testimony. So I'm about ready to walk off the stage, and a 15-year-old girl walked up to me, very haughtily, and she says, I don't believe in your God. I said, really? Okay. I'm packing up my guitar and my equipment. I'm ready to leave. But she caught my attention. And at that point, I said, well, why don't you believe in God? Do you believe in the devil? Oh, yeah. I said, why do you believe in the devil? She just looked at me straight. She said, this is a 15-year-old girl. I have sex with the devil. Okay, back then that sort of thing would never have been heard of. Nobody would have spoken about it. You know, Rosemary's Baby hadn't even come out yet. I said, oh, well, let me talk to the devil you have sex with. We're off to the races. And this thing came up and talked about being a lover to her. You know, now, of course, people in deliverance ministries developed a theology about spiritual spouses, spiritual husbands, and that sort of thing. But nobody talked about that. Nobody knew anything about it, and I certainly didn't. But I spent the better part of that evening until early morning hours with this young woman. What was really interesting about it, though, is right in the middle of it, she started speaking in a very distinct, high-class British accent. And the demon said he came from England, and that's why he spoke like that. So there was enough supernatural confirmation that I knew I was onto something. And then after that, not much happened. But then when I committed myself to...
Was she delivered? Or?
Well, as far as I know, she was delivered. I never know what happened to her. I didn't even know to get a name and address back then to follow up. I've never known what happened to this woman. I mean, we cast it out. I had another gentleman there who had seen some missionaries do this and talk about it, so he jumped in to help me out. But
did you have like any understanding even? I mean, you already knew how to, you asked the question, hey, I need to speak to the devil that's inside of you. So you had some framework of deliverance and expelling demons out of people.
But not from a book.
And you also are not coming from charismatic background.
No, nothing. And so here I just walked through this. I knew I needed to tell that thing to go, and then it wouldn't go. And, well, why won't you go? And it was just trial and error. I did the best that I possibly could. But that was my introduction. That's a pretty significant introduction. And so nothing happened for a while, actually a couple of years. But then when I made the commitment to go into ministry, and I started to travel around the country speaking and basically sharing my testimony. I wasn't really a preacher. Again, people would come up to me and start talking about supernatural things. You know, one of the turning points in my life was when another young girl comes walking up to me, and she said, would you just pray with me? And I said, sure, what do you want me to pray about? And I would guess she was about 15 or 16. She said, I compulsively masturbate and can't stop. And I said, okay, well, when did this start? When I found my father's pornography. Now, I did not know at the time that the father was a deacon in the church where I was speaking. That's another whole can of worms.
They didn't fill out the questionnaires.
No questionnaires, nothing. So I just said, okay, I'll try to help you.
Oh my goodness.
So it was a series of cases like that. I had no demonology. I had no construct. I had no theological framework to work from. And at that time, there weren't any books. Nobody talked about this. So I just did what I could, and then it developed from there.
Yeah, I remember when I just came to the United States, and my pastor, who's my uncle, he watched you on TBN.
Yeah.
I think you were coming like Monday, 10 p.m. They put you like at that time when all the demonized people probably need help, like very late into the day. And so he discovered your program, and he would constantly tell us to tune in. And we were like 13 and a half, 14 years of age, and very hungry for the spiritual, supernatural world. But that was strange. I remember first time watching it, I was like, what is he doing? What is this man doing with the cross? And then, you at the end of the program, you would have your next seminars. So, and you would frequently come to Portland and Seattle.
Yeah.
So I still remember that in the back of my head. Our pastor takes the van, loads us in, and we're like 13 and a half years of age, and we're going to go see Bob Larson. And all of us are like so intrigued and then scared at the same time, because we had demons. We just didn't want those demons to come out yet because we didn't fully understand what was happening. And the first time that I came to one of your seminars, I meet a guy there who has a hole in his tongue, and a demon that has been passed on from one generation to another marks each generation by making a physical hole in their tongues. So he's telling this story to us. This is before the seminar, and I'm standing there and I was like, oh my goodness, this stuff is real. And it marked me, because then this person starts to manifest during the seminar. And this was first time being in the church service. I grew up in the Pentecostal church, so I've seen pretty interesting things that interrupt the services. But usually it's somebody breaks out in tongues or something. I've just never seen somebody breaks out yelling and screaming, and you didn't see that as an interruption. You actually almost like looked forward to it.
Oh, yes,
you stopped
absolutely.
your sermon and you go up to that person. It was not a large room. It was about maybe 70 or 100 people. And then it just went on. And those things that I saw on television and then now on YouTube channel, it was happening right in front of my eyes. And that really marked me. That marked me, scared me and marked me. A few months later, we have our church anniversary. So a lot of Slavic people gather, and my pastor opens the whole conference by playing 5 of your videos.
I've never heard of this.
So I remember parents, because they had no idea. They came to celebrate a church opening. And the pastor gets up and says, the power of God is for today. There is this minister. He's American. He's white. And God uses him. Let's watch the power of God. And he turns on one deliverance, and it's like some Egyptian god Ra, and then another deliverance. And I remember looking around the audience, and parents are hiding their kids and they're scared to death. This is, first of all, in a Slavic culture, this is like a thing.
I know.
And pastor gets up afterwards like, okay, well, praise God, let's go into worship now. You cannot go from that. It just marks you. And so my pastor has always been, I would say, the catalyst of making sure that we were exposed and grounded and had deliverance ministry as an essential ministry within the church. And thank you for being that example. And now it's 24 years later.
Yeah.
And we're sitting here and you are continuing that ministry. Not only you continue that ministry, you have personally ministered to me. You have personally ministered to a lot of people on our team. And I just want to say thank you for doing that and being faithful to that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. The transition to get to that point, though, was very, very difficult.
Could you share a little bit about how you went from that deliverance, the deacon's daughter, to what we saw in 2000s when you were on the radio, when you were on television, and what we see now. If you could just kind of in a capsule form, give us that journey.
The Lord, when he works in our lives, particularly those in ministry, he has to take us through some very uncomfortable experiences to get us where he wants us to be, to get us outside of our comfort zone, even outside of our theological frame of reference. And that story that I just told you had an interesting ending, because I felt at that point when the young woman said that to me, if I was going to pray with her, I needed to be under proper authority of the pastor of this church. And the pastor of the church needed to know what was going on. So I went and told the pastor. I said, can we please go to your office? I have a young woman who's demon-possessed. I didn't even know. I didn't have the sophistication to know. They didn't believe that, and it couldn't have happened, and it didn't happen, and it wouldn't happen. And
because Christians cannot have demons.
Huh?
Because Christians cannot have
Christians
demons.
can't have demons. And you don't deal with demons of any kind anywhere. You just lead people to Jesus. But certainly, they couldn't be a Christian. So we go to the pastor's office. And we got there, and I told the pastor the story. And I said, call the father. And he's like, what? Now, at that point, I didn't know he was a deacon in the church. Call the father. He needs to come here. This is his daughter. He's got demons. He needs to help me. And found out then he was a deacon in the church. I said, I don't care. Wake him up. This is like midnight. Woke him up. He comes into the church, bleary-eyed, sits down and says, what's going on? And then the daughter spills the beans. She had found his pornography that was hidden right in front of the pastor. And it was a tense moment, but to the father's credit, he didn't fight it. He loved his daughter. He had a struggle with pornography. And that was before the internet, okay? So I cast the demon out. And I thought everybody was going to be excited. Father and daughter were hugging each other and crying. And the pastor stood up and said, and he had a couple of his associate ministers there, he said, not a word of what happened here will ever be spoken of again. I thought, what? God just did something great? And he said to me, you will never tell anybody about this. Okay, so we left the room. I left, went back to my home, and didn't think too much about it until somebody sent me a little cassette tape. You this before your time.
I remember cassette tapes.
A cassette tape of the Sunday morning sermon that pastor preached the next Sunday morning. And it was all about me because the word did leak out. And he had to stomp on it immediately. I don't remember everything that was in that sermon, but I was roundly condemned as being of the devil, not a man of God. But worse yet, he looked at this audience of people, and this was a huge church, one of the biggest churches in America at that time, 5,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And he said, we don't believe in casting out demons. We don't believe Christians can have demons. And if you think you have a demon, go somewhere else. We're not helping you here. I thought, what a horrible thing for a man of God to say. So I got really angry with God. I was really mad because I thought this pastor was going to be the gateway to more opportunities of ministry. You know how you think when you're young in the ministry, oh, I get to preach in this big church and he's going to tell all his buddies about me.
Plus you had this crazy, amazing deliverance.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I thought he was going to share it with everyone. But anyway, so I was angry with God, and I went through a period of about a week when I couldn't pray. I couldn't feel anything. I was very bitter. Lord, I was obedient to you, and that's what I got for it. Then I got a letter in the mail. This too is before email. I had to wait a week to get a letter from this young woman. And she said, I've stopped masturbating. I don't look at pornography anymore. My father's repented.
Wow.
We have a great relationship. and our family is better than it's ever been. I've never had a life like this.
Wow.
And so the Lord asked me a question in my heart. Which is more important to you? What the religious community thinks? What a pastor thinks? Or a young woman who has her life transformed and her family is healed and this sin issue has been dealt with? And I can still to this day see myself holding that letter and crying and bawling my eyes out. And knowing that I needed to ask God to forgive me for my bitterness toward him for overreacting to this situation. But that was a turning point. I knew I could never go back after that.
Wow.
Never. Because what the Holy Spirit said to me was, which is more important to you? The approval of people or the healing of one soul whose life has changed? And you know, Jesus did this with the woman of the well. Defying every convention, every religious rule. But that one woman, who was a pretty messed up woman, was more important than what people thought of him. And this is the lesson that people have to learn in ministry. It's one soul at a time. Whatever ministry it is, whether it is healing, deliverance, whether it is leading them to Jesus Christ, one soul is worth it. One soul is what matters to God. And if we keep in ministry our focus there, it'll get us through a lot.
You know, when you're sharing this, I am thinking about that man who had a legion of demons. And Jesus, he knows everything. He went to that region, helped that man, delivered that man. And the whole city rejected Jesus.
Yeah.
And looking at the ministry of deliverance, it feels like it's usually like that. You're helping one person, and the price for that is the rejection of a larger community who don't feel like they need deliverance, or who are very good at hiding their sins, and they do not want somebody to go into this, and they don't want to address that. Why do you think the ministry of deliverance is so rejected in the church? Because you've experienced a lot of rejection from the Christians.
Constant.
I mean, I feel like God has opened doors for you. And when I watched some of the interviews with secular people, they were kinder to you. They were
very
actually
different.
honoring of you compared to the Christian community. Why do you think there's so much pushback against deliverance in the church?
Anderson Cooper, Dr. Phil, in the day Phil Donahue, I got a long list of these people, been nicer to me than pastors. But, you know, it was that way with Jesus. It was the people who heard him gladly, not the religious leaders. So sometimes, you know, that's what you have to learn, is to understand who you're really working for, who you're really responding to, what call you're answering. Why do you do this? And I don't just mean those of us in active full-time ministry. I mean the lay person whom God has called to pray for people, maybe to be an intercessor, maybe to minister deliverance to people. They're going to go through the same thing. You think the devil is just going to sit there and let that happen without putting up a significant resistance toward it? Of course he's going to attack you and keep attacking you. But I going to say early in my ministry, you got to get past the bullets to the blessing.
Oh.
Because the bullets are going to come at you from every which direction. You got to push on through it. On the other side, there's a blessing. And honestly, I'm one of the most blessed people that I know, because I have the things that matter. All right? First, I have great health. I'm in perfect health. I see every kind of doctor a couple of times a year just to make sure everything's going great. Clean bill of health. No, I hand that over to the Lord. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I don't know of anybody at my age and this point who could keep up with me for a day, let alone a week at a time, at the pace I go at, and continue to fight the devil day after day, hour after hour. That's a gift from God.
Yeah.
But then my wonderful wife, my 3 wonderful children. I mean, what really matters? Family, marriage, the call of God, health and strength, Isn't that what everybody's really working toward? Isn't that what everybody really wants at a bottom line? And they try to get it in so many kinds of ways. And I believe that I'm living proof that when you get past the bullets, there's a blessing waiting for you. And if you stay true to what God has asked you to do, after some serious struggles, you will find the peace and the presence of the Lord and all types of things that will come your way that would have not come under any other circumstance.
What would you say? Would you say that is the secret of your longevity?
Yes,
Is
absolutely.
looking through the bullets or looking beyond the bullets and enjoying the blessings, because you're a family man. You don't have a scandal all the years that you have served God, all the years that you have, and you never shifted your focus.
Never.
Because some people start with deliverance and then jump to something else.
Always.
Yeah, and then you from the beginning, whether it was popular, not popular, accepted, rejected, you kind of keep, it's the same Bob, the same consistency, and that's so admirable.
Well, what they're looking for is something cooler, newer, faster, better. I don't look for that. I think there's a great lesson in one of the champions of the faith, Dr. Bill Bright of Campus Crusade, who came up with the 4 spiritual laws. He didn't tinker with that. He just came up with 4 simple ways to win people to Jesus. And it resulted in many millions of people coming into the kingdom of God, something very simple. If you listen to Billy Graham preach, it's not profound. It's not deep. But it has a genuineness about it that people still watch it today. And he affected an entire world because of that. So don't tinker with God. Just take the calling he's given you, follow through with it, stay on track. And listen, I have, by the grace of God, raised up and mentored many thousands of people, and some of them really get weird. Really get weird. They know more than me. They haven't been through 100th of what I've been through, but they know more, and they can do more, and they're better at it, and they'll prove it by having some strange, odd idea. And I won't go into a list of those things because somebody's going to say, oh, he's knocking this ministry or that ministry. Just keep it simple.
How were you able to keep your family healthy and your marriage in the midst of all this, in the midst of the attacks, in the midst of the ministry of deliverance? Some people see that when you go into deliverance, then your family will pay the price of getting these demonic attacks and children will not serve God. Not only your daughters are very successful, but they're also in deliverance. I mean, your daughter came here, they even have books. They were on the secular channels talking about deliverance. They love God. And from the outside looking in, and also knowing on the inside about your family through people that know your family, there's a very positive report that your family is healthy, that you have a good marriage, you have a great family. How were you able to accomplish that? I know it was God, but what did you do? How did you contribute to that while doing ministry of deliverance?
Consistency, agreement. I'm not perfect. My wife's not perfect. We've had struggles with our children. But they've not gone awry. They've not gone way off. They may have detoured a little bit, not into deep sin, and not into real issues, because we raise them knowing the reality of spiritual warfare. When we had our first child, my wife said, I don't want to scare the kids. So the first child, who now is a medical doctor, and she's one that came and actually spoke for you and ministered to people. My wife said, I've got to shield her from this. I said, no, this is real. Let them experience it. No. And so she tried that with the first child. Well, how are you going to shield your child when the national media is knocking down the door and people are interviewing him and he's on television and he's here and there and everywhere talking about casting out demons? You can't shield that from there. So the turning point came actually one night in Africa. So this first child was a little bit older. Now we had 3. And my wife had not let them really get the full impact of this. So, I guess she thought, well, we're in Africa. It's going to be okay. So So here we are in this meeting, all right? And my wife brought all 3 children, and they're sitting there. And, I took my cross, and I start down the aisle to rebuke the demons. And this guy comes flying out of some seat somewhere, a full body tackle, knocks me down, gets on top of me, starts beating me, and this is their introduction. And my wife is thinking, I don't know what she's thinking at that point, but anyway. So, I recover and cast the demons out of the guy. I said that night after, okay, I guess they've seen it now. She said, yeah, it'll be okay. If they can handle that. But it did raise a question, because they were all saying, Dad, you teach us that if we walk with Christ, we'll be safe. You teach us that that's the safe place to be, to follow Jesus.
What happened?
And I said, look, what's the end of the story? So the guy knocks me down. He didn't kill me. I wasn't permanently injured in any kind of way. I got back up and cast the demon out. It's spiritual warfare, kids.
Wow.
So sometimes you're going to get knocked down once in a while, but you get back up, you fight the devil, and you keep going. So in summation, that is the lesson that our children have learned. And I will tell you, you will learn this someday. You will see this someday.
When did they start to engage with you in deliverance?
Well, they didn't. And really, it was only the older one who got into this on such a deep level.
Okay.
The others were present. They came, they would help me, they would pray with people, but they didn't feel a real call toward it.
Okay. So just the older one.
What came out of all of this was an understanding that wisdom is being built into the lives of these children. And as I was saying, you will hear come out of the mouths of your children someday. Things will bless you and amaze you. And you will think, they really were watching. They really were listening to me. All those years they sat here listening to me preach, they were getting it. You're going to think they weren't getting it. I promise you. You'll go through that. Like, do my kids even listen to what I say? Yes, they do. But they got to work through things on their own. And that's, again, the blessing. Because my children now are not going near stuff that other children will dabble in, because they know. And they've told me, Dad, we're not touching that. We're not going near that. We see the danger. We know what it does.
But you getting punched, it's kind of scary.
Yes.
So if somebody is listening to that, I love how you presented your perspective. Hey, so what? I got a little bit punched. The end of the story is we won. But there were some other cases where you got knocked out.
I did.
And it seems like, but you're saying ministry of deliverance is safe. How do you reconcile that it's both safe and dangerous?
I'm alive, in good health. I've sustained no permanent injuries. It hasn't deterred me in my relationships with my children and my wife is what really matters. And God has continued to bless me. Have there been some battles along the way? I could tell you many of them. Probably the most interesting one was when I got knocked unconscious by a guy. And I was ministering, and he jumped out of the chair. Before I knew it, he had knocked me unconscious, and I was on the floor with blood everywhere. My wife, Laura, jumped out and said, in the name of Jesus, I bind you and I command you to be judged by the angel of the Lord. And the guy just collapsed on the floor. Now, the demon did what she said, but the demon caught me by surprise. But what did I learn from that? Something very important. I wasn't supposed to be ministering to this person. He came with someone else, and I violated a ministry rule. When people come to see me for personal ministry, they have to fill out an intake form. I want to know something about them, what their history is, and what I'm getting myself into before I sit down to minister to them. It's just a rule.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they brought along this young man, just a 15-year-old kid.
Wow.
And his father was in jail for murder, and he'd had a horrible life. And they said, oh, please, he just came with us. Can you take a few minutes and pray for him? I broke a rule. I knew better. I let my compassion get the better part of me. I put myself at risk. I didn't know what was going on. I sat down and I said, tell me something about yourself. Boom. So you learn these things in ministry. That's not God's fault. That's my fault. God gave me wisdom. He gave me experience to know how to handle situations. If I don't follow the biblical and practical principles God has given me, I am going to put myself at risk. It's not the fault of deliverance. God didn't let me down. I was unwise.
And plus, some people who maybe are listening to this and they're like, yeah, but I have been doing deliverance. I never got hurt. Bob, could you in perspective put us, how many one-on-one personal deliverances have you done up to this point?
A couple of years ago, I stopped counting at 50,000.
50,000?
Yes.
So for those of you who are watching maybe and you're like, yeah, you know, I don't get punched. Well, you've done only 5 probably or 7. So get to 10,000 and then come back with the story. And so I think because here you're listening to a person who has done this, and then approximately a day, how many you do on the average?
I do an average of 1,500 to 2,000 exorcisms a year.
1,500 to 2,000 a year.
That sounds like a lot, but if you look at my schedule and you do the math, you see how that adds up.
Yeah, because every day, pretty much, Monday through Friday.
Day, all day long, every day, 5, 6, 7 sessions, sometimes more a day, and sometimes more than one exorcism in one session. And then I'm doing that 5 days, 6, sometimes 7 days a week.
And people sometimes accuse you of doing it for money because you charge for deliverance. And what many people don't know, as you're hearing this story, especially when Bob is sharing about his experience in the beginning when he had a choice, do I please the pastor or do I go after the hurting people? What many people don't know, many people who make these accusations, first of all, that it takes finances to run the ministry. Secondly, you've dedicated your whole life to this. The Bible clearly states work is worthy of his wages. But I have had people who went through your encounter sessions who were not even believers. One of them that many people know, and it's not a secret, was Everett. Everett scheduled a one-on-one encounter with you, and he went there to learn how to cast out and have bad light with the good light, some new age stuff. And not only you took time, not just to, hey, I have a session, you took time to minister to him, you took time to evangelize to him, more than even what was the session.
Yes.
And right there and then, you led him to the Lord, and he's one of many people that this happened to. And he left that encounter crying nonstop for 30 days. And he's not a crier. And he deeply encountered Jesus, became a Christian after that, forsook the New Age, and eventually came here and started to work for my ministry, married a person. And so, and I hear these stories on a lot of different places. And so, but why do you do what you do every single day now?
Levitation is the act of someone rising in the air, apparently defying the laws of gravity while supernaturally suspended. I've seen levitation, but the phenomenon is extremely rare. From movie plots, one would think an exorcist sees levitation happen all the time. Not so. The cases of levitation that I've witnessed have been fleeting and scientifically unrepeatable from an observational viewpoint. Only once in my many decades of ministry has there been a possible levitation viewed publicly, but unfortunately there was no video of this happening. One version of levitation occurs during so-called astral travel, when the ostensible astral soul separates and rises above the physical body. Since this generally happens in spontaneous, somnambulant states, objective verification is impossible. Proponents say that during soul-body separation, the astral soul can travel great distances. Some claim to visit friends, strangers, even ex-lovers. In Nepal, I was told of Tibetan Buddhist lamas with highly developed powers who could leave their bodies and appear before their disciples many miles away. I've met many demonized people in Europe and America who have experienced this form of levitation, but it's hard to know if what happened was real or mentally imagined. Some practitioners of TM, Transcendental Meditation, claim the ability to fly. They refer to it as city fly, and that's SIDHI, based on the Hindu idea of displaying magical powers. The TM meditator supposedly transcends to a state of bliss consciousness and then bounces up and down in a lotus position. I've administered deliverance to ex-members of TM who claim to have done this form of what's known as yogic flying.
Why do you do what you do every single day now? You could have retired already.
Well, yes, that could be, but what's the point? And just in reference to what you say, a lot of people don't understand that to do what I do, I have to have a staff, I have to have facilities, I have rent to pay, I have an overhead, where am I going to meet with these people? How am I going to meet them? Who's going to schedule them? Who's going to handle this huge influx of people all wanting to get to me? That all has to be managed. I have to have people to manage that. And then all the invitations I get to go here, there, and everywhere to speak or to appear in various shows and so on. There's a lot. It's not just me and a Bible and a cross sitting down somewhere on a street corner. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make all of that possible. So you want to know what?
Why do you do that now? You could have already retired. Start writing more books.
So what drives me?
Yeah.
All right. Why not? Why would I do anything else? If I retired, what would I do? Just drive my wife crazy? Go play golf? I've played golf. I've played a lifetime of golf. I don't want to play golf anymore. I'm not getting any better at it. What's the point? Okay? I'm fulfilled. I have
That's your calling.
Significance in the kingdom of God, significance with my family, and significance with myself. Isn't that what everybody really wants, a sense of significance, of feeling that they're doing something that is meaningful? I might be dead if I had retired. Seriously. How many people, they retire.
Yeah, and they start dying.
And they die because they don't have a reason for living. So what is my purpose in life? To do this by God's will as long as I have strength and health until Jesus comes. Why not?
Amen.
Can you think of anything that's more exciting than what I do every single day? Oh my goodness, I come home at night. My wife debriefs me. And I'm sitting there telling her stories. I'm saying, you know, I've never met this demon before that I met today after all these years. Listen to this story about this demon that suddenly showed up out of nowhere. Wow. We sit, talk 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and we go back and forth and we talk about the things of the Lord. I'm bonded with my wife. I'm bonded with my kids. Come on. I have a great life.
Come on, somebody. Now, I know you've answered this probably a million times, but what do you say to people who say that Christians cannot have demons?
Well, first of all, the people who say that don't do deliverance.
Okay.
They don't actively do deliverance. Do you know anybody in deliverance who believes that? Of course not. Because the people who come to them and manifest demons are Christians for the most part. 99% of them probably, right? So there would be no deliverance ministries of any kind. God has raised it up with you and some other great deliverance ministries. You guys have nothing to do in that particular realm if Christians couldn't have demons. All right. Secondly, it is an ethnocentric, xenophobic, Americanized, westernized system of belief. Okay? The Catholic Church doesn't believe that, and they were doing it a long time before we did it. Nobody in significant ministry in Africa believes that. They don't believe it in India. They don't believe it in Asia. In non-westernized, non-Caucasian cultures, they don't believe that. Slavic cultures don't believe that. They know that. We in America live in a theological bubble. This is what people don't understand. Wow. Okay. The theological frame of reference of America is basically European, but it's an Americanized version of that that only goes back a few centuries. Doesn't go back very far. All right? So our experience in America has been as a protected culture by a couple of oceans and theistic people who founded the country. There was a wall against evil. This didn't exist in the rest of the world. So for millennia, and certainly for hundreds of years, they have had to deal with demons. And then as Christianity came, they had to deal with the reality that when someone became a Christian, they had to get rid of their demons to walk with God. This never developed in American theology, which was essentially Calvinist-based. And as a result, people were able to keep it out of their field of vision. So the people who say that can't happen, from the pulpit, on the internet, in churches, they're absolutely isolated from the reality of what's going on in people's lives. They don't know. They're pontificating from a pulpit. They're standing there in their little ivory tower, and I don't mean to say this denigratively, but that is the reality of what they're doing. And they don't deal with the messiness of the world. For one thing, they don't counsel, they don't pastor, they don't minister to her. Now, I know it's hard to do, especially if you're a successful pastor. It's hard to find the time to do that. But you got to stay in touch with human need. And if you stay in touch with human need, where you're going to have good Christian people coming to you with junk experiences. Why is this happening to me? You're going to have a nice Christian woman say, I have to tell you, Pastor, I'm being raped at night, and I don't know why. Now, of course, that's really not going to happen because she's never going to tell him because she knows he wouldn't listen.
Wow.
So the possibility of ministry to somebody who has demons and is a Christian has been precluded. Do you know any Christian who has a demon who's going to walk up to John MacArthur after he's preached on Sunday morning and say, is there any way you could pray deliverance for me? Of course not. It's precluded. And he's a good man of God. He's done wonderful things for the Lord, except he ripped me up on national television one time, but I forgive him for that. So this is the trap.
And you get these people coming to you
they
from
come
those
to me.
churches.
I had a lady just come to me a couple of days ago. She said, I went to every priest in my city. I went to every evangelical pastor in my city. Nobody would even talk to me. I talked to her in 5 minutes and demons are popping up all over the place. Just because I listened. I listened. Pastors, many times, don't listen.
Ouch.
They preach at the people. They're laying down the rules. They tell them the way it ought to be. They don't hear the way it is in the real world for the common person. In our world of exploding internet porn, the dramatic explosive growth of the new age and so on, they don't hear these people.
Do you see that the wall that we had before when this country was founded has its cracks now, with so many young people exposed to witchcraft, the occult becoming almost domesticated, almost common in our generation. What would you say are some of the most common ways you've seen people get demons?
Well, I don't mean to be unkind in saying this, but we have too many theological leaders in our country who are just dinosaurs. They're part of a past that no longer exists. It's gone. They were in another age. This is the new age. This is the age of occultism, mysticism, metaphysical belief systems being normative, not odd and unusual. This is now the dominant belief system. And if you study things like I have through Pew Research, one of the major religious research organizations, Lifeway and others, they do all these polls, but it shows that essentially 75 to 80% of evangelical Christians don't believe that Christ is the only way, that there are other ways to God. So this creeping sense of compromise, this is the new normal in America.
Unfortunately.
Wake up, church, wake up, pastors. There's a new normal, and that new normal brings with it a truck full of demons. And you have to be prepared to deal with it. Now, here's what's interesting. Because this can no longer be ignored. Many of these pastors, I don't want to name names, but now they've suddenly become experts on spiritual warfare, and they start talking about spiritual warfare. And I'm thinking to myself, I know some of you guys. I know what you guys have told me in private. And you're out there talking about spiritual warfare. You've never cast out a demon. You don't know what you're talking about. You are really on dangerous ground. But because now the ground is shifted, thanks to people like you and others who have taken up this cause, the others out there can't ignore it the way they used to. Look at all those millions of people watching Pastor Vlad. There must be something going on. Oh, I'll co-opt it. I'll jump onto it. And I'll talk about it. But that's dangerous because you don't know what you're talking about, because you don't have the empirical reality of having confronted it personally in some kind of way. That's very dangerous.
What are some of the common open doors you have seen for demons, of the demons you've cast out? I've noticed that almost in every deliverance, the open door didn't start with those people. It started generations before. And it had to do with some kind of either human sacrifice or witchcraft or dedicating a bloodline. And you have a lot of resources dedicated to that, to curses. And do you feel like that curses, generational curses especially, are the central gateway for demons to harass people?
Well, you've stated it very well. The first issue is getting past whether or not a Christian can have a demon. And the second issue is whether or not they can be affected by bloodline curses beyond even generations that they know. And this is something else that pastors just throw out. They refuse to recognize it. They believe it's not possible. And of course, I've dealt with this many, many times theologically. If you ignore that, you ignore the reality of even neurobiological research and what's going on today with an understanding of how human behavior is affected generation to generation. And scientists now are beginning to understand that. So even in the psychological community, they know sometimes they have to treat behavior that's been genetically inherited because they even want to know about ancestral issues in therapy. Well, that's interesting. The church over here, on the other hand, by and large, is oblivious to that. They don't want to ask those questions. You come to the cross, you give it all to Jesus, the blood covers everything, he was a curse for us, go on your way. Well, they go on their way, but then what we have, all these culturally demonized Christians who are on their way, but they're going to tarot card readers. They're reading their daily horoscope. They're calling up psychics. I mean, I have people, as you know, as we just said, who come to me on a daily basis. I have a huge human data point of reference to confirm what I'm saying. And these people, I'm born again, I was saved at such and such. And I just needed to know whether or not I was going to get married someday, so I went to a psychic. Or I called up Madam So-and-so on the phone, or I went on the internet. I didn't think there'd be any harm in it. Mm-hmm. So that's the mindset we have today. That wall's not there anymore. Christians are doing this. Good Christians, born-again people. They love Jesus. They think in their hearts. And they feel like, well, it's you know, I only look at pornography one day a week. I only made 3 calls to a psychic. And the devil just starts working his way in. Mm-hmm. And again, the wall's gone. It's not there anymore. Mm-hmm. Part of the other problem is that wall was there because of legalism. Mm. So a lot of Calvinism and those kinds of mindsets, and even traditional evangelicalism and Pentecostalism, mm-hmm. legalism tried to keep the wall up. Think, act, speak, dress, do, you'll be okay. No longer.
It's no longer.
Yeah. For example, I've had an interesting behind-the-scenes ministry of outreach into the Amish community. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of very spiritually hungry people there. Mm-hmm. Talk about roles.
Oh, yeah.
They got them. But there's another younger generation coming along. Mm-hmm. It's not playing by those rules anymore. And they're suffering the spiritual consequences of it. Mm-hmm. That's happening all across the Christian community. I thank God for people like you who are part of a new way of thinking about this, mm-hmm. who appreciate the heritage of the past, but understand there's a new territory that the church is facing today mm-hmm. that didn't have to.
What do you say about this new wave of, I feel like some of them genuinely are doing deliverance? I would say since COVID, there has been this, it got highlighted more and more online. There's a lot more interest in deliverance. And of course, a lot of us, the younger ones who are connected, we do stand on your shoulders. We acknowledge that publicly, and we honor you privately and publicly. But there's some also weird stuff that is happening as well. I know that overall we're happy that people are talking about it, pastors are talking about it, but anything that you've noticed or any specific message you would have to this younger people who are almost like they're riding the wave of deliverance exposure?
I have a lot to say. First thing I would say is, watch out, a riptide's coming.
What do you mean by that?
You can ride the wave, but you never know when there's going to be a riptide that's going to take you under. And you will have some crises that you will have to go through. And this bubble that you're in will burst. So just be ready for that. You know, don't just feel exalted because of all the great things you see God doing. Satan is very clever and Jezebel never sleeps. Something is going to happen. Just be ready for it. That's the first thing. Secondly, don't try to overly dramatize what's going on. Mm-hmm. Keep it real. Keep it simple. Don't embellish it. And I could name some names, which I won't, who almost toy with it, almost play with it. Mm. I'm not saying they don't love God or that they really do want to help people, but this is territory that is paranormal, unreal, fascinating to people, and they will watch things or see things displayed mm-hmm. that maybe are best not seen and should not be happening. There's a lack of wisdom. And mm-hmm. basically, there's a lack of theological depth. So if you look at the resume of certain people, they're an apostle. What? How'd you get to be that? Who told you that? Who suddenly made you a monkey mark? out of nothing. Wait a minute here. There's some dues to pay. You're not paying any dues. You're just suddenly out there as a great voice of God in Revelation. And the other thing I would say, so much I could get into a lot of trouble with here. If you're going to make the statement, the Lord is showing me, He better be showing you. The Lord has revealed to me this or this or this or this or this. And I say to people, if God has revealed something, keep your mouth shut. Let it guide you behind the scenes as to how you maneuver to defeat the enemy. And then there may be a time you can say, thus saith the Lord. So we've gone from 0 to 100. And without a lot of theological background, training, study, depth and understanding into the miraculous, and then into the miraculous, and then embellishing it. And then wanting claim to immediate fame by having a title that seems to be very august and very impressive. Now, I don't want to demean some people who have legitimately prepared themselves properly and do have the credentials. But a lot of people come to me, now this is going to shake up some people, and they get demons from these people.
Wow.
And I'm not naming names. Might tell you in private, I might not. Of people who have gotten demons, and the demons tell me they came when so-and-so laid hands on them to cast out a demon. Now, this is dangerous because I don't want people to, oh my goodness, I'm scared if I have anybody pray for me. I'm not impugning everyone. Just be wise.
I feel like so many people have been discovered before they've been developed.
Yes.
Discovered way too prematurely. You know, when my wife was pregnant, you know, and I've learned about the importance of just because you want to see your baby born faster, it's not healthy. You want the baby to be in the dark, in the womb. That's where the most essential development happens. And I feel like in the world of, if you have a camera and a microphone, you don't have to have a voice. You don't have to have anybody kind of developing you. You just pretty much feel like that's it. You're the authority now. And nowadays, you know, if you know how to cast out a demon or a demon to manifest, it's done by so many people for clickbait, by so many people. It's done for a show. And it's kind of grieving. And what you mentioned is that, you know, there's going to be a crash. And even the deliverance ministers are going to experience that if they don't deal with, number one, personal issues, and secondly, if they don't humble themselves and begin to take correction. The demon that you cast out, I would say probably the most, you mentioned that in your Jezebel book, is Jezebel. How's Jezebel operating, and what is Jezebel's assignment when it comes to churches, ministers, and Christians?
Well, know the agenda. I like to keep it simple. Jezebel is control, manipulation, murder, sex, and the destruction of people in ministry. That's what she is.
Wow.
Jezebel is a murderer. She murdered the prophets of God in order to establish the religion of Baal. She wanted to murder Elijah. She murdered Naboth. She murdered anybody who would get in her way. And of course, we're probably talking mostly about spiritual murder here. But He wants to murder the calling, murder who you are and everything about you. And then she manipulates. Master manipulator. I deal with that demon more than any other, and I recognize the tactics immediately. It's a mind game. You know, if you deal with a demon of, say, death or Beelzebub, whatever, the agenda is kind of straightforward. Jezebel's everywhere. She's constantly maneuvering and conniving and trying to manipulate the circumstances. Even in a deliverance session, she will try to draw you down one road. And you have to play chess with Jezebel. Move here, move there, move here, move there. And she's always looking to checkmate you. She's always looking to get you to start believing something. And this is another thing about being, a little bit gullible and young in the ministry of deliverance. You can start believing these things Jezebel takes you, and suddenly the problem's over here, and she's got you over here. Manipulation. Murder. She just kills. Manipulation and control. Control is huge. She's not satisfied unless she completely dominates. First of all, she comes from the Phoenician kingdom as a priestess of Baal. She comes down to Israel. She's got to have the throne. When she gets the throne, she's got to destroy the religion. She has to have all the prophets of God killed. And they were all except 100 who were hidden in a cave. And then that's not enough. So she's got to control this. Now she's got to control Ahab. This puny little vineyard of Naboth is nothing really in the greater schemes of a king. But you got to have it. Got to have it. Murder. Manipulation, control, sex. This is why Jezebel is so prevalent today. Our culture is about sex and eroticism and lust. That's Jezebel. Now, I've said this before. You may have heard me say it. When I look at the intake profile of someone before I ever sit down to minister them, if I see they have been raped or incested or molested, or oftentimes all three, and they've never had deliverance, they have Jezebel. And when I start the deliverance session, after I've taken them through breaking some curses and various prayers, I just look at them and say, okay, Jezebel, you're there. Come on.
That's her traits.
You're there. There's no way this woman's been molested, raped, and incested. You're there. Oh, and she has incubus spirits coming and having sex with her at night. You're there, Jezebel. So it's just a matter of time until Jezebel manifests. Jezebel is always there in those situations. But the other thing is, Jezebel wants the destruction of men and women of God. And again, you see, she wasn't content just to be queen. She had to destroy the worship of Jehovah. She wasn't even willing to let her prophets and God's prophets, sort of compromise and be with each other. No. True religion, true faith has to be stamped out. And she doesn't stop until the man or woman of God she's after is obliterated. When you understand that's who she is and what she's about, you know what to look for.
And for somebody like Elijah, who is at war with Jezebel, what are some of the things that you would recommend to the men and women of God, people in ministry, to keep themselves guarded, or to keep themselves, I guess, what some of the encouragement or instruction would you give to someone like me, to a minister in war with Jezebel? We're not talking about, of course, when the demon is inside. We're talking about on the outside now.
Well, let's look at Elijah. I still don't understand this guy, just from a psychological standpoint. I don't get it. He performs all these miracles. He calls fire down from heaven. He's bold. He says, take all 850 of those prophets, slaughter them, get rid of them. Boy, this guy takes no prisoners, does he? Jezebel says, within 24 hours, it's going to be you or me that's dead. And he runs. He hides under a tree, and then he hides in a cave. He runs. The Bible says he literally ran a considerable distance. What's going on here? What is it about Jezebel that can so intimidate someone? Now, we're looking at historical Jezebel, of course, but this is the prototype from which the demon draws its characteristics. Jezebel defines herself by that way, and the pre-existing Jezebel-type spirits through Isis, Astarte, Ashtoreth, Kali, all these
Lilith
other things.
as well.
Okay. So when you know what you're faced with, you understand that this is unrelenting. It doesn't back down. It understands only force, but it's very beguiling. Look out. If you deal with Lucifer or Leviathan, for example, it's just a power encounter. You know, the will of the man or woman of God versus the demon. But Jezebel, very seductive. So how do you stay safe? What do you do? How do you avoid being Elijah running off in the middle of nowhere just trying to get away from this thing? I think it's by outside of deliverance and outside of ministry, normalizing your life. Normalize it. Now, in spite of the odd, strange, incredible stories I can tell all day long about the supernatural of the devil, I know when to walk away from that. I know when to leave it. I don't leave the calling. I leave the opportunity of ministry to go be me, dad, husband, friend, whatever that role may be. I go live a normal life. Okay? So I cast out demons all day long, come home, go walk the dog with my wife, sit down and talk about life, the sunset, whatever interests us, politics. We're both political junkies. So we talk politics. We get back to things that bond, that are natural, and ground me back into the fact that I'm not just a man of God fighting Satan. I have these other responsibilities.
Wow.
And some people in ministry don't know how to do that. They're almost obsessed with being in the place where they are the man of God, always calling the shots and doing this and doing this and in demand and in need and et cetera and so on. And that's the lesson I have had to learn.
Wow.
But fortunately, my wife and I both hike, bike. We love the outdoors.
Because even Elijah, he had to get some sleep,
Yeah,
get some food.
get some rest.
Yeah, get some rest. And like you said, you have to normalize, you have to get to the normal part of your life instead of everything being spiritual and supernatural and fighting all the time. That's wow.
And that is a lesson that the sooner you learn it, the better off you'll be. It's hard to shut it off. There's always one more desperate person. There's always one more demon to fight. Jesus hung it up after 3 years, quite literally.
That's right.
He said, this is it. I'm going to hang on a cross. I've done my job. Now you go do yours.
So good. Dr. Bob, thank you for your time. Thank you for experience that you were very honest with us and sharing all of that. You have a school. You have an international school of deliverance, advanced courses. Could you speak a little bit about if somebody wants to learn more about deliverance, where they can take those courses? What if somebody listening to this is getting that feeling, hey, I think I need to go through deliverance myself. Where can they receive that deliverance through your ministry?
Well, first of all, I've always believed in education. I've always been a student of the humanities, sociology, history. Always had a medical interest because I did want to be a doctor. I had planned to be a doctor one day. And so I try to blend all of this thinking together. I was a student of world religions early on, wrote one of the definitive books on the subject that's still used in Bible colleges today. My burden was to take that and put it into the context of demons, the devil, and the supernatural. Because, again, that's what's missing. So about 10 years ago, I established something called the International School of Exorcism. 30 courses that walk an individual through the basics of history and theology about exorcism and deliverance, on through the practical aspects of what you have to recognize, look for, and then a template for actually doing it. Out of that grew a movement called Do What Jesus Did, that is the establishment of chartered deliverance teams all over the world. Now, these are very carefully vetted people. They have gone through our training, and now not just that one section, but we now have Bob Larson University, which is 4 departments. But if I walk you through the departments, you'll see that development. So we first teach the School of Exorcism, why exorcism is important, why it exists in the body of Christ, and the essentials of going about it. But then the next department is called the College of Apologetics and Demonology. So how do you defend your faith? And how do you understand demonology in relationship to the broader world? The demonology of Islam, of Hinduism, of Buddhism, of the New Age. So you intersect the demonology of these false systems with the true system, but you have to understand what that is. We have something called the Advanced Academy of Deliverance, where we get into very specific things, such as who are the demons? How do they operate? What is the hierarchy of evil? We don't teach that in the beginning. We just want to get the basics. These are the foot soldiers, the infantry, doing what a basic soldier does. Now, if you want to rise in the ranks, then you get into the understanding of the real kingdom of Satan and how it's organized. And then finally, we have the Institute of the Supernatural, which is the 4th department of Bob Larson University. And there, we try to get people to understand what the true supernatural is. And the main premise of there's 10 courses in each of these departments. So this is not easy stuff. It is deep stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Epistemology, pneumatology, the empiricism of belief and how you acquire that. Then we try to get you to understand the supernatural as it really exists. And the one thing that we try to get across is we have underestimated what the devil can do. We don't understand how supernatural he is. So I take people through the temptation and explain to them, look at what was happening here behind the scenes. Some stuff I've never heard anybody talk about. This is supernatural. This is what Jesus was really dealing with. And we have glimpses of this, for example, with Jannes and Jambres back at the confrontation with Pharaoh and when they were duplicating the miracles of Moses. Oh, it goes way beyond that. We don't know what he can do, but we get glimpses at it, and we better know it before we say, well, the devil can't do that, and the devil can't do that. Wait a minute, brother. I've seen him do it. He can. Now, he's not greater than God, so how do we get the balance? So my goal was to fully educate the interested Christian who wants to really get the full dynamic of spiritual warfare. You can take the first school of exorcism, go out and cast out demons. Praise God, go do it. We're behind you. And the other thing I want to say is that a lot of people don't know we have a true international network of people who meet by Zoom. We have a European division. We have an Asian division. We have, of course, the United States, and then we have a European division, and they meet regularly as trained exorcists to talk with one another, to share with one another, and to have teachings and learning from experience of what each is and shared wisdom. My goal here is to do more than just get out of bed, go to the office, meet somebody who just flew in from England, cast demons out of them, and go home. No.
You're training people.
I want a legacy. I want something that lasts. I want something that's going to be here long after I'm here, that is a body of evidence that people can look to. That's my heart. That's my vision.
Thank you.
To me, the problem with deliverance, and it's been a one-off thing. One person doing a handful of deliverances and getting really excited about it. Let's make it a major arm of the church that is intellectually, historically, biblically, and existentially defensible.
That's good. Thank you for that. And guys, the links for this school are going to be right below this video, as well as if you're the one that is in need of deliverance as well. We're going to attach the links there. You can schedule a Zoom deliverance with even Bob or one of his associates and receive that ministry if you need that ministry. But if you've been freed and this conversation was helpful to you, I really want to encourage you. May the next year be the year where you grow deeper, where you understand things, where you gain knowledge, and you learn from the best in our generation who has not only done it, but also studied it, studies it, and is willing to share that with you. I'm a testament of that because I went through the school. I didn't go through the last course. I think that one was just recently released. But the first 3 levels, I went through it. It's incredible information. It's stuff like that you don't get from any college, any university. You don't get that stuff anywhere because it's somebody who actually takes you through the Bible, takes you through the history, takes you through experience, combines all of that. And so it's a pretty heavy stuff, but good stuff that is important and needed. So, Dr. Bob, thank you for your time. Thank you for your ministry.
Well, and thank you for being part of a newer generation that has been willing to answer this call. Frankly, it was a lot easier for the disciples to cast out demons than us. The world was not as sophisticated in terms of evil. Satan's had 2,000 more years to build up his kingdom. We've got a tougher job. And you, and the others who are part of your generation, you've got a tougher job than I had. Because the disintegration morally of the world is much more severe. And even since I've been around, you think the devil's been sitting still? No. He's saying, oh boy, now we have to deal with Vlad. And so on and so on. And so what is he doing? You got it. There's got to be symposiums in hell that said, we couldn't figure out Bob Larson, but we'll figure out Vlad or whoever. And I'm serious about that. I mean, Satan is going to make it even tougher. But the grace of God is greater. Amen. The power of Christ is limitless. So go do it. Go do it.
Amen. Let's go do it. Do what Jesus did.
Your financial support and prayers make it possible for us to bring hope for the hurting and freedom to those in spiritual bondage. For the latest information regarding ministry outreaches, go to boblarson.org or call 303-980-1511.